All right, hopefully you guys can hear me now. My battery got down to like 20%, and so I plugged it in, and then as soon as I plugged it in, hey Becca, can you hear me? Do we have sound? Do we have sound? Can you guys hear me? Yes, no, maybe so. Okay, good. So I was down to 20%, so I plugged in my phone, and as soon as I did, it disconnected all of my Facebook options. It deleted my microphone, my camera. Then it completely kicked me off of Facebook every time I logged in. It logged me out of my Messenger, logged me off Facebook. As soon as I got into Facebook and would hit the live to go live again, it logged me completely out of everything. And then my entire phone shut off for the last 25 minutes. And then it just came back up again. It's really annoying. Okay. Especially because then two parts of these films are very difficult to share. And so I'm sorry, maybe I'll put it on live stream or YouTube. I have a reason I don't use YouTube. It's because I really don't want a following. I just want to get the information out. And I feel like I do that effectively on Facebook, and so I just don't like using the YouTube channel. Maybe I will change. Okay, let's get right back at this. My favorite word. Okay, so we ended off with the meeting where Shauna was saying that the employees of the refuge felt intimidated, and Mumford explained that they looked like they felt intimidated. I'm sorry, I'm going off memory and I'm wrong. That Shauna stated the employees looked fearful, and she only stated that because they were shredding documents, and they were in the conversation discussing that, saying how they looked fearful. So now it's 2:45 at this point. It's after break, and Mumford states that in the rules for the conspiracy, it must be done from an illegitimate purpose. And then they showed, they showed some Facebook communication and text messaging between Gavin and Ammon, and it was just really simple things back and forth where Gavin was asking about the protest, asking if people were coming with their weapons, and Ammon said he would never go to a protest unarmed or without his arms, which really wasn't a big deal because Ammon didn't even show up to the protest armed. He brought a weapon, but he left it in his vehicle like a lot of people did. And then Mumford asked, is it illegitimate to tell your government to respect its limits? Is it illegitimate to tell your government to uphold the Constitution? He says, didn't Jeff Banta even admit to conspiring to help the Hammonds? If there was anything he conspired to, it was just to help the Hammonds. Then they posted a picture, prosecution used in their evidence, a Facebook image of a army guy holding a gun, kneeling down, and it says, "Forgive me, Father, for I will sin." And the prosecution used this as part of their evidence. Literally a meme of an army guy, and it says, "Forgive me, Father, for I will sin." And that states that Ammon is about to enter into a conspiracy to impede federal officers from doing their job through threats, force, intimidation. I don't think so. So what Mumford explained is that the Facebook page, that they knew it was being managed by 4 or 5 people at the time that meme was posted. So we don't know exactly who posted it. And then Mumford went on to ask, we also don't have the other 6 names of informants. So perhaps whoever was managing Ammon Bundy's Facebook account was actually a federal agent. And perhaps a federal agent actually posted this meme. Since they took it into evidence and thought that it was so important, one would think that there's a possibility it was actually the informant who posted the silly thing, as though it mattered anyway. And Mumford pointed that out. There's nothing illegal about the post, and it doesn't prove anything. let's see. So when he goes back on to talk about this maroon pouch and how Ammon Bundy understood with adverse possession that meant the property, as in the land, that he would be adversely taking the land, but that he would have returned any property that you can touch, you can pick up with your hands, somebody's pictures, their computer, those things he would have returned to the rightful owners. That they weren't looking to steal things from people, they were looking to reclaim land that had already been stolen. You guys, that's the kind of the ironic thing here through all of this, is that the government is saying Ammon stole the land, right? That he broke in and he took over a federal facility, when in fact all he did was take a piece of land that they had stolen from the people, and he tried to give it back to the people of Harney County. And he knew if he went to court he could prove this. If they could unravel the titles, they could prove that the refuge land was not acquired legally. Let's see. So at the beginning, Ryan focused on these gas tanks, and the prosecution had used these gas tanks saying how they were stealing gas from the refuge, and they just didn't even care. Well, one day, and I admit there have been times I've been frustrated thinking, what in the world are they doing for the defense? But Ryan kept pointing out to the whoever was on the stand at the time, I don't remember, do you see the marks on the gas tanks? I think it was the refuge manager. And he was saying, no, I don't see the marks on them. Well, come to find out, there were marks on all of the gas tanks, and they had made those marks so that they could see how much gas they used, and they could make sure to replenish it whenever it was that they left or went and got gas next, that they could replenish it and replace exactly what they used, because when they got there, the gas, somebody had paid money for that gasoline, and they were not just going to use it without reimbursing it. Again, really bad conspirators they were, if that's what they thought they were doing. Okay, so then they lay out a chart of earlier on. Remember how the prosecution made the statement, this isn't whodunit, this isn't a crime of whodunit, and that it wasn't their job to go through and figure out who owned what gun, that all the guns left at the facility were now a part of the full conspiracy. So all conspirators were responsible for all these weapons, even though we have all these unidentified informants that very well could have brought them. So the prosecution acted as though they had no idea who owned these guns. The defense found out that the prosecution did in fact know who owned those guns. And of everybody there in the courthouse, there's like 4 guns owned by all of them, even though all 37 guns were entered into evidence. So they listed the name, and I don't think I'm actually going to read it, because maybe some of the names aren't, maybe people don't know them, and I don't know who thinks they're hiding still from the government and who doesn't. I don't think any of y'all that were there are hiding from the government. Unless you were there on behalf of the government, then the government doesn't know who you were. But if you weren't there for the government, they know who you were and they know you were there. But I'm still not going to read all the names of who owned the guns. There was one gun that had been last registered owner was a police officer. So Mumford brought that up, saying one gun is registered to a police officer. Could it be true that these guns were actually from the FBI informants and are being brought forth as evidence against these defendants? Again, the informants cannot be a part of the conspiracy or anything that breaks the law. So 9 employees who testified to working there. Okay, so now he goes on into talking about the employees. He said there were 9 employees who testified that they currently worked at the refuge while it was occupied. And they played a video of Ammon, the prosecution played a video of Ammon saying, if we leave, they will put the chains right back on the people. Mumford's response to that was, that only works if the employees were in fact enslaving the people. If the employees were not in fact enslaving the people, then Ammon's statement of they will put the chains right back on the people is a moot point. Good point. Ammon's attorney wants to know which duties of the 9 employees were they? Which duties of the 9 employees did the 1,000+ visitors impede? He said, do we even know what these employees do? We can't just say that they showed up to work and sit at a desk and therefore Ammon hindered their duties from being completed. What duties? Because our understanding is that they actually left and went to another building and completed their duties and received a paycheck. So what did they keep them from doing? You can't just pull it out of the sky and say they would have had work to do that day in the middle of January. What work did Ammon's presence keep them from doing? You have to state that if you're going to state that he did in fact conspire to keep them from doing their work. What was their work? They were in fact able to continue doing it at another facility. The prosecution did state that there was a controlled burn they weren't able to complete because of the occupation, and that just made me laugh that he even had the nerve to state that they needed to do a controlled burn when this whole case is around, you know, it started from the Hammonds and the controlled burn that the government, the BLM started, that then the Hammonds had to start a back burn. It eventually went a little bit onto the government land. They end up in jail as arsonists. So just to hear him say the BLM needed to be doing their back burns, I just thought, did you really have the nerve to bring that up with all the testimonies about the BLM intentionally burning land, burning horses, cows, barns? Let's not talk anymore for the rest of this case about the BLM and the fact that they should not. Smokey the Bear needs to pay them a visit, right? They should not be playing with matches. This is an organization that should not be playing with matches. They have proven to be irresponsible, as I would tell them if they were my children. No more playing with matches for you. The government has not presented its case. They presented pictures, videos, and a theory, but they did not present its case. They did not bring what they promised. The recording on the 19th, let's see. There was a meeting on the 19th of, this is either November or December. If you're on, Sarah, I'm sure you can correct me. So there was a meeting on the 5th of the month, and then another meeting, like 2nd or 5th, and another meeting on the 19th. Sheriff Ward testified that the meeting on the 19th was worse than the meeting before. But see, Sheriff Ward, I don't think he realized that the meeting had been recorded, or maybe he did, but he didn't know what was on it. So he states this meeting was worse than the meeting before. And then they play the recording. Of course, they played it a couple weeks ago, but they play clips from it today. And you hear laughter. You hear Mr. Ward making jokes about how Ammon Bundy's message hasn't changed. If anybody's message has changed, it has not been Ammon Bundy's. His words never change. His statements do not change. His principles don't change. And there's laughter in the room. And at the end, they all thank each other for their time together. And his statement was, if Ward was saying that the meeting on the 19th was worse than the previous one, then the previous one must have been pretty amazing, because this sounded like a pretty great meeting. Then on top of that, Ward testified for the prosecution that the reason he turned things over to the federal government is because of his understanding of Bunkerville, okay? He said that on the stand. Because of what happened in Bunkerville, I felt intimidated and afraid for my people. And now I have to try to, okay, here we go. Then they play a clip from the recording of that meeting. And Ward says, let's see, in the recording he says, Ammon, what happened in Bunkerville was wrong. What the authorities did was wrong. How they let it come to an armed standoff between the American people and the BLM was wrong. So the defense got to play this. Of course, they couldn't play it as evidence all the way through the trial, because our judge is also a prosecuting attorney, and you're never going to get anywhere when your judge is a judge and a prosecuting attorney. But he was able to play that for closing arguments today, and show that Sheriff Ward lied on the stand. He said that what he knew of Bunkerville is part of what made him turn things over to the FBI. But then in this recording in November, he said that it was actually the authorities who messed up in Bunkerville, and he handled that very, very, very wrong. Okay, so then they bring up Supreme Court Justice Potter Stewart, Edward versus South Carolina, 1963. I didn't write the whole thing down, but the basic of it, it said, this is why the First Amendment is protected against censorship or punishment. And that was, I think, in regards to a few statements maybe that Aunt Ammon made. Let's see. So going back to the fact that Ammon obviously has a problem with authority, as the prosecution had earlier stated. He says, Ammon's quotes are things like, Sheriff, we want to help you do your duties. We want to stand behind you. We will support you. Even to the employees, we will help with the research. We will provide the evidence. We want to help. These things need to be exposed. The corruption and the injustice needs to be exposed. They were stealing land. The BLM was stealing land. They were lighting fires. They were abusing the people. After the November 19th meeting, both Ammon and the Hammonds received threats. This is also the same time Sheriff Ward admitted to beginning dialogue with the FBI. So same time FBI comes into town and Sheriff Ward starts discussing things with them, the Hammonds and the Bundys start receiving threats. Coincidence? Based on what we've seen so far, I think not. Mr. Bundy respects the law, the local sheriff. He supports and will stand behind the sheriff. He has full respect for local authority, for small government. Ward on the stand said that he was scared of Bunkerville. That proved out wrong with the recording. They showed a picture of Ammon after the Bunkerville standoff when he holds that sign up that says public land temporarily closed, and he's holding it up in the air. And he says, did you guys catch in the video that before he cut the sign, he went over to the sheriff and asked permission? You see him holding the sign up, and it's a sign that the prosecution actually used as part of their evidence of what happened at Bunkerville, as though, you know, Mr. Bundy, Ammon Bundy, is just this, disrespectful man ripping this sign off this gate. But in the full context of the video, he asks permission from the sheriff to cut the sign down, and the sheriff grants it. And then the sheriff and the ranchers together go and get the cattle back. See, if you guys think you know Bunkerville and you still think that the Bundys were the aggressors, then you don't know Bunkerville. You don't really know what happened. You know what you think happened. You know what you want to believe happened, but you don't really know what happened. The prosecution has misled you in saying that the Hammond case had gone to the Supreme Court. In opening or closing arguments, the prosecution did state that. He said this was a case that went to the Supreme Court, basically was dealt with, it was over. He said that's not the truth. It did not go to the Supreme Court. The BLM was lighting fires, killing cows. The Hammonds did a backburn to save their property. Mr. Bundy is holding them accountable. And then he yells out, that's one hell of a conspiracy. Of course, there's things in between these sentences. I'm just reading the quotes that I was able to read as he was going through it. Then he states the quote that this troll out there, and I won't even give her the credit of saying her name. There's actually a few of them in a group. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. And Mumford says that again, and he says that's still Ammon Bundy's position, is that sunlight is the best disinfectant. And guys, if the prosecution had something on Ammon Bundy, we would have heard it. Really, they have done everything they can to discredit this family, and every time they try, it shows that it's just empty threats that they've had. Just like many trolls out there who say, we have information on the Bundys, we're going to out the Bundys. No, you're not. No, you're not. You're just talking, but you're all talk. You're not going to out the Bundys because there isn't anything you're going to out them for. You have things you think you're going to out the Bundys on, just like the prosecution did 6 weeks ago. Oh, did they think they were going to out the Bundys? I don't think so. I wouldn't be surprised if by the time this is over, every jury member is heading to the Bundy ranch and asking Carol what they can do to help until her family's back home. Okay, Chris Brile said the FBI was operating in the dark, intimidating the people of the town, dressed up as rednecks, intimidating people when they were in fact the FBI. Okay, 410. They had a picture of Ammon shaking hands with Sheriff Ward at the refuge. And he's saying to him, how about our redress of grievances? When will you have an evidentiary hearing? It wasn't Ammon wanting to have the meeting. Oh, okay, so then going into something. So he wanted to have this evidentiary meeting or hearing for the Hammonds, which Sheriff Ward would not agree to do. He wouldn't look into it any further. And then in the time that Grasty was on the stand, he said that the reason he didn't let Ammon have the meeting in town was because he didn't have the proper insurance. So then when the defense got a hold of him, they were able to get him to nail down. I wasn't there when Grasty was on the stand, so I don't know if he was still on the stand at this point or not, but they were able to nail down that it had nothing to do with insurance, that there was no rules or regulations that kept Grasty from allowing them to have the meeting when they were there and asked to have the meeting. And he said, in fact, it wasn't even Ammon asking. It was the Committee of Safety that wanted to have this meeting. And he says, it was Grasty's own town. It was his own community that was asking to use this facility, and he was telling them, no, you don't have the right insurance. Whatever. It's constant abuse of power, and that's just a small piece of it. At one point, Grasty had said, I don't remember where, I didn't write down the quote, but he said at one point, there have been no state laws that have been broken. Because you guys got to remember, they're basically doing a sit-in. They're occupying an empty building. Think about Occupy Portland or Occupy Wall Street, right? I mean, oh my gosh. Occupy Portland was a mess and costs the taxpayers a whole lot of money. And so at this point, they're figuring they're taking care of the place. They're occupying an empty building. It wasn't what the media and the news made it out to be. Michelle Fiore had stated, I would have never gone there had I believed that they were breaking any state laws. Ammon says we were bringing hope, we were bringing light. The government says adverse possession proves their claim, but why didn't they fight them in court then? If they're saying now adverse possession proves that Ammon Bundy sought to impede federal officers from doing his job, then he says, then why didn't he just take them to court on the title claims? Why did they give them these ridiculous charges of impeding federal officers from doing their jobs? People that really shouldn't even legally be considered officers. They don't carry any authority, right? They're in there doing book work and doing back burns. These aren't the type of officers that the law was meant when it states officers. So he was saying, why didn't they fight us in court? Why didn't they challenge what we were saying if they thought that they would come out of it okay? Because they knew that it would be proven that they didn't go through the right steps to take over this land, to purchase this land, and that the land ultimately would be given back to the people. Let's see. He was saying, why do we have conspiracy charges? The title dispute would have been proven that Ammon was right. That's why they came up with charges just like the Hammonds. Did you light the fire? Well, yeah, I lit the fire. Okay, you're going to jail because you broke the law. They come up with these charges that they think they can win on that have nothing to do with the heart of the issue, because they're deceptive and sneaky, and they're terrorists. All they do is terrorize the American people and steal from us. The federal government is as bad as the king, is worse than the king was. They're terrorists. They steal from the people. So you got to remember this silly little side note. Robin Hood didn't steal from the rich and give to the poor. He stole from the government and gave to the people. Maybe Ammon Bundy is a little bit like Robin Hood. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17. Let's see. The federal government had not consulted with legislation to get the land. Now I have to find more of my notes. Oh, here we go. Oh my goodness. Okay, so this was kind of cool. He did this little chart. Again, he had a ton of slideshows in his presentation, and I'll just show it to you if you can see it. So he did this little slideshow with little, let's see if it'll focus. There we go. With little check marks, and it said, based on adverse possession, which of these 7 points fills in either the government's theory or the defendant's case as explained, either for force and threat or for adverse possession. So every one of them ended up being a check mark for the defense. The only one that covered both in the end was security and control of incoming and outgoing. So he was saying, what is that? Something. Yeah, I'm not a scholar. Oh no, somebody's gonna stop and ask me if I'm okay. It's probably a cop. I'm gonna end up in a long conversation. I just feel it coming. I'm never gonna get home at this rate. Okay, so the main points that he did, there's another hiccup. I didn't hiccup, Julie. Is there? Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Okay, so the main things that they asked was, Ammon consistent in his teaching of adverse possession? Didn't go his teaching of adverse possession all the way throughout, and a lot of people said this wasn't really about adverse possession. If you'd been in the courtroom and you'd seen all the proof, you would see this was completely about adverse possession, that it really was about adverse possession. So his teachings on adverse possession lined up with the defense case, but not the government's theory on intimidating and threatening employees. Changed the names and the signage. Gave notice to everyone to force the government to prove that they actually had a claim on the land. Lined up with defense, not prosecution. Post office and mail that Ammon set up. Lined up with defense, not prosecution. Paid for the garbage to be picked up. As in adverse possession, you have to assume all the responsibilities as the owner and act as the owner of the property. So again, defense, not prosecution. Cleaning and any upkeep of the facility. It was a big deal that they were cleaning and maintaining the facility, because that's how adverse possession works. You literally take it over as your own, and you have to take care of it and be proving that you're keeping it up and you're actually improving it. And then the last one, security and control of incoming and outgoing. That's the only one that they could say maybe that it was their way of impeding. But then he stated that even at the courthouse, they control the coming and going. But did I feel impeded to come or to not be able to enter? I had to go through a scanner. I had to let him dig through my purse. There were armed guards standing at the front. I had to take off my shoes and my coat. I mean, that was kind of intimidating, right? But was it their intent to intimidate me or their intent to control the safety of the facility? You tell me. I don't know. I hope it's just for my safety and that they're not trying to intimidate me, because if they were trying to intimidate me, it didn't work, right? I go to the courthouse anyway, even though there are armed guards everywhere. They also had a schedule that they showed, the government did, trying to show what a military operation this was and how intimidating it must have been for an employee to even consider going back to work. And again, the very schedule that Ammon had written out with all of the people that were volunteering there is no different than the courthouse maintains, right? They have a schedule. They have different guards stationed to be at different doors. It's not to intimidate me, even though they make me like strip down and they dig through my belongings of my purse. It's for safety. But yet Ammon having security lined up because they had already been getting threats was now him trying to keep employees from doing their jobs. It just doesn't make any sense, you guys. No other person was in. So Ammon Bundy's plan was adverse possession. If his plan was adverse possession, in order to be a part of a conspiracy, you have to be conspiring to do something illegal. So if he was moving into the legal realm of adverse possession, then he wasn't doing anything illegal. Therefore, anybody who joined into his so-called conspiracy also wasn't doing anything illegal. They were moving into the legal realm of a diverse possession. So again, they did not prove these guys' intent was to conspire to keep people from doing their jobs. There's a few things he'll say here that actually get better. I'm just about done. I think he has, let's see, I've got 3 pages left, but I'll read through them quickly. There's a few really great points Mumford made. So he says, effect versus intent. You guys need to understand that these charges are not about the effect. They're about the intent. Did these people, and the government has said this over and over, this isn't about if they actually kept somebody from coming to work. This is about, did they intend to keep somebody from coming to work? So he says, you're at the store and you buy the last can of chili, and the next person comes up and they're deprived of the food they intended to buy. The effect of what you did took away the food they wanted. But was that your intent? No. It wasn't your intent. You did nothing wrong. Then he also says, as the jurors with you guys being here right now, you have been deprived from being with your families. You have been deprived of time and money and other obligations you would have been a part of. And he said, should we put the court on trial for conspiracy to impede you and deprive you from your time and your resources? Or is the fact that you were deprived from these resources the effect of you being called to jury duty? It's not that they had the intent to do anything illegal. It's just the very legal action they were doing left an effect that you could perceive as negative. But what they did wasn't illegal. Okay. It's funny to actually read your comments, Gavin, on a live stream since it's usually reverse. Okay. Yes, we do need to love them by opposing them. And that's exactly what our founding fathers did, is they opposed unjust laws. Okay, did the court conspire to keep you from your family when they called you to serve the jury? Is the purpose of a 4th of July parade to impede traffic from traveling down the road? No, but does it in fact impede traffic from driving down the road? Yes, but that wasn't the intent of the 4th of July parade. The effect is not the same as the intent. Here we are, and you are to judge the intent. Let's see. We have been honest, genuine, and complete in the information we provided you with. The government has been anything but. They promised to provide you with information, and then I didn't list all these out, but they promised at the beginning of this that they would bring Joker Jay to the witness stand. They said, you will hear from one of the defendants themselves what these people did. And then they also said, we will prove to you about the military operation and how they went in with guns and took over this federal facility. It didn't happen. They literally knocked on doors and said, is anybody here? Is anybody here? And they only entered the buildings that were unlocked. The rest of the buildings they were able to enter eventually was because they had gotten keys that were left at the facility. So he goes through a whole ton of things and says, I'm going to read you all the things the government promised you at the beginning of this trial that they have not proven beyond a reasonable doubt. Let's see. They also lied, saying they tried to de-escalate the situation when they actually sent in informants that escalated the situation, like the training that they did. And this informant actually pulled a gun on Ryan Payne, and he ended up choking somebody. I want to say it was Blaine Cooper. They ended up in a fight or something and ended up choking one of the guys. And then he says, oh, I loved this, because this whole thing has been talking about reasonable doubt. And he said, with each picture that I've asked you, was this an informant or was this one of the occupiers? And in the law or whatnot, it says they have to prove either with the evidence or by a lack of evidence somebody's innocence. And he says, If you have reasonable questions right now with the information that the prosecution did not prove and did not provide you, if you have been left with questions, those are reasonable questions. That's reasonable doubt. And it is. We all were left with questions. There was tons of videos, tons of evidence the prosecution provided that we were saying, what is this? Where did this come from? Who is this in this picture? That means that's a question, which is also a doubt. And they're supposed to be proving beyond reasonable doubt that these individuals did the crime that they are being convicted of or being indicted with. They were indicted on charges that they could not prove the guilt on beyond reasonable doubt. Brings up Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17 again. Shows videos. So now they show videos of Ammon and Lavoie. That was hard for Jeanette to sit through. I can't even imagine. I can't even imagine. The videos were great. Ammon says in the videos that this is going to be a hard stand, but it will be peaceful. We will reclaim what was taken. And then he says, who will go with me? And for any trolls out there, you know, most people like a good villain hero movie. And as this is being played out, if you can't see who the villain is and who the hero is, then you haven't been paying attention. Because the hero says, we will take peaceful steps and we will reclaim what was taken. Now who will go with me? That's not the villain. That's Ammon Bundy. That's the person that you've been dead set on attacking for the last year and misunderstanding and misrepresenting in the media. You've been calling the hero the villain because it makes you feel better and it's the easier road to take. Because in this case, the villain, the government, is powerful. And a lot of people hide behind power. But it doesn't mean you're on the right side just because you're on the most powerful side. Oftentimes the most powerful side is the villain. And seems like the easier choice for the weak-minded, for the coward, for those who don't have integrity or courage. But that's not Ammon Bundy. And siding with the bullies of the federal government was never an option for him. We call that Bundy strong. So then they play a video, I'm just about done. They play a video where Lavoie is giving an interview, and it's another video that I had watched early on. And he's giving an interview to a gentleman, and he's quoting Ammon, and he says, oh wait, I didn't write down any of the quotes, but I remember the video. He's sitting in a chair with a man who's got a beard, and he's got a beard, and he's got like a bunch of tattoos around, underneath the beard, and he's explaining to them what they're doing there, and giving a little lesson on the federal government and on the abuses of the BLM and what the obligations of the people are. And then they do a video of Ammon, and Ammon is talking to the people. Okay, for people who think that Ammon just wanted to, when he says he wants to get the loggers back to logging and the miners back to mining, do you understand that trees, when they die especially, need to be cut down or they just become a fire hazard? There's a lot of people out there that want to pretend that the best way to take care of land is to do nothing with it, and that's not true. That's an absolute lie, and that goes in the absolute opposite direction of what we truly understand about this environment and how things all work together. One of them is cutting down dead trees. Ammon said that in Harney County there is 7 to 10 years of dead trees that could be harvested before they would have to cut a live tree down. So to you environmentalists out there, as you're sitting at home at your computer on your desk made of wood, and then you go to bed and your bed frame is made of wood, and you're complaining because you think that the trees shouldn't be cut down, but you use a whole lot of things that are made out of wood. Can you really look into the evidence before you just write somebody off and say that they just want to desecrate the land? 7 to 10 years, Ammon said, of dead trees that need to be harvested. One, because the resources need to come back to Harney County. This land is in Harney County, in the state of Oregon. It's not Washington, D.C. It's not the king. It's not Mr. Obama. It's not his land, okay? It's Oregon. It's the state of Oregon. And specifically, it belongs to Harney County and to the people of Harney County. And so Ammon is saying that he wants to get the loggers back to logging, and he wants to clean up the forest so that it can thrive, so that there isn't a fire hazard. And he says, then back to another video of Lavoie, he says, we love the government in the proper confines. And then, let's see, Mumford says, I don't even remember the rest of the quotes on the video right now because it's late. But he says, why is it that when Mr. Finicum says, I'm going to meet the sheriff, follow us. You'll remember on the scene of the ambush, they don't at first know who all these unmarked cars are, and it had to be terrifying to be surrounded by all those federal agents. And he yells out, who are you? And then he says, I'm going to meet the sheriff, you can follow me there. Do you know it's actually legal if you get pulled over and you feel threatened or intimidated that you can go to the nearest police station or find the nearest officer, that you don't have to pull over. You can actually call 911 and say, I'm intimidated by the officer. I don't know if it's an officer or not, or it's an officer that's aggressive. Do you know that that's actually legal? And he says, why is it that when Mr. Finicum says, I'm going to meet the sheriff, come follow us, why is it that there are red lasers bouncing on his head? I'm going to meet the sheriff. Follow me. And there are guns pointed at him and red lasers. Does that sound like somebody who's de-escalating a situation to you? Did the media talk to you guys about that? Or did they just show you a scene of a man running from the police? Yeah, that's what I thought. They lied to you. Go watch the videos again. Watch them a little closer with a more objective eye. The government doesn't have rights. The people do. Do you get that? The government can't be the victim. The government doesn't have rights. The people do. So then Ammon does this K2 video. They ask him who he is. Don't blame veterans. Are you guys arguing on my page? Don't argue. You know what happens when people argue or bicker on my page? They get blocked. I'm block happy, remember? So I hope nobody's arguing on my page because you all get blocked. I'd rather have a small following of people who are focused and determined on getting something done than a massive crowd following behind that wants nothing more than to eat each other alive. So never feel bad about blocking me or unfriending me. I'll never feel bad about doing the same to you. Let's see. I think we're just about told. I think we're on the last thing. So he says, interview with K2 News. They say, what would people be surprised to know about you? He says, I've been a business owner now for 18 years, managing a vehicle fleet truck mechanic type business. I don't know exactly what it is. 6 kids, 3 girls, 3 boys. I didn't know that until today. See, when I go in to see Emin, we don't sit and talk about his family. We usually talk about the Constitution, and I learn things from him. He has a 5-acre apple orchard. I knew he had an apple orchard, but I didn't know he had a 5-acre apple orchard. Or he lives on 5 acres with an apple orchard. And he serves apple pies to his neighbors because that's what his wife enjoys doing. That was on the K2 interview. That was just a part of it I wrote down. I don't know why. There were things I didn't know about Ammon Bundy. And then Mumford says, we have a choice. Oh no, Ammon says this in the video. We have a choice to act or be acted upon. Do you guys like being acted upon? At some point, do you not want to be peaceable and principled and act? Are you not tired of asking permission from your federal government for everything you do inside and outside of your home? Any activity that you do, that should be considered a natural right, you ask permission to your government. Sounds to me like the old Robin Hood days when you get arrested for hunting a deer because the deer was the king's. What happens if I kill a deer without a permit? Or I kill one more than my permit allowed? That's what I thought. Okay. He says, to act or be acted upon. Right here. Okay, Mumford says, right here is where they wanted to be today. Why? Does Ammon Bundy like jail? Does Ammon Bundy like the stress of trial? Why did Ammon want to be here today? And then he kind of dramatically paused and he says, because he's been waiting for you. He's been waiting for you. His trial by jury. And then he says, one of my favorites, stand. Stand alone if you must, but stand. And say this must stop. It cannot be illegal to tell the government to stop. The First Amendment protects the right to free speech and the right to assemble, and the Second Amendment protects the first. Stand up. Stand up for liberty. And that's how he closed. And of course, I love the hashtag stand, because from the beginning of this, there were times where I didn't know what else to say. I was learning. I didn't understand a lot. And all I knew is that it doesn't matter how it ends. It matters how you stand. And that was a quote that I remembered from Lorie Kramer. And there were times at the beginning of all of this where I hosted rallies, had no clue what I was doing, talked to reporters that I didn't know what to say to them. People asked me, what are we doing next? And I would think, I don't know what we're doing next. Don't you know what we're doing next? I reserved the location here. Somebody else is going to lead, truly, because like Ammon's always saying, I'm not the leader. I just have a vision for what we needed to do here in supporting these political prisoners. So I didn't know a whole lot about what I've been doing, and I've definitely been learning as I go. But I know one thing, and that's that we need to stand. We need to unite as a country, and we need to support each other. If you knew Ammon Bundy, if you knew Ryan Bundy, you would be compelled to stand. There have been weeks after weeks where I've gone in to visit these guys, and they are the ones encouraging me. They're encouraging me. They're sitting behind bars, being denied bail, receiving cruel and unusual punishment, not even getting to stand before their accusers in court because so many of them were sealed as informants. And they were encouraging me, do what's right and let the consequences fall where they may. And they often said to me, if you can't come visit, don't visit. Do what's best for your family. Your family comes first. Always, that is what they have said. Your family comes first. You guys, these men don't belong in jail, and the very fact that they are in jail shows me how absolutely far we are as a country. Not just that the government took them to jail, but that the people were so deceived that the people stood back and did nothing. You guys, one African American is killed by police, and the whole country is in an uproar, as they should be. But you have a rancher shot 3 times in the back, provoked, shot, I believe, with a rubber bullet in the lower stomach first that made him bring his hands down. And I've seen enough proof to believe that to be true. He was provoked and he was murdered, and he was teaching on the Constitution. He was teaching on your rights. And you say, he doesn't speak for me, but guess what? He says the words of your founding fathers. It doesn't matter if you like it or not. He's speaking for the true American people, the patriots, those who love their freedom, not the loyalist, not the communist, not the person who wants to be dependent on their federal government to cook and clean for them and pay for their education. He wasn't speaking for that person because that person can never be free because they're a slave to their government. They want to be fed by their government. That's a slave. Ammon Bundy is speaking to the free man, and that's who our founding fathers were speaking to, is the free man. The man who didn't just love freedom, which is the absence of jail, but he loved liberty, which is the right to choose as long as his choices were not taking away the liberty of somebody else. He's speaking for that person. So if that's you out there, even if you've been a hater, I just want to encourage you. I'm an ordinary person. There's nothing exciting about me. Just ask the trolls. They'll tell you there's nothing exciting about me. But let me tell you what, I'm awake, and my husband and my kids are awake. And just about anybody who comes in contact with me has a choice to make, because they get awakened too, because it's a part of who I am now. I'm not just a believer. I'm not just a born-again Christian, but I'm a free man. Okay, now the trolls are going to laugh at me. I'm a free woman. But I choose to be free, like Lavoy Finicum chose to be free. I choose to be free. So I'm going to do what's right, and when I feed the homeless and I get nervous about not having a food handler's card, I'm not going to live as a slave. A slave says, is it legal? A free man says, is it right? Is it right? Even Christ himself defied the authorities constantly, and he spoke boldly, and the people followed him, and the authorities hated it. He was raising people from the dead on the Sabbath. He was healing people on the Sabbath. He was telling people to eat food that the authorities didn't want them eating because it broke their laws and their customs. Jesus submitted to God as the authority. Love your neighbor as yourself. Love the Lord your God with your heart, soul, and your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. Both of these fulfill all the laws and the prophets. So if I feed somebody, or if I come stand up for a neighbor who's being abused and it lands me in jail, I'm going to do what I'm called to do and let the consequences fall where they may. And the more people who do that, the harder our government is going to have to work to keep the people locked up. So let's put our government to the test. Let's ask them if they really stand behind the American flag and the founding fathers. Let's ask them, do you understand what it means to be free and to have liberty? The United States Constitution protects us from a tyrannical government, from a government that doesn't want to follow laws, from a government who thinks it can break the laws and then run for president. That's the government that we have right now, you guys. But then they tell us, when we stand up against them and we protest and we push them back into the confines of the Constitution, they tell us that we've broken a federal law and we're now going to go to prison. That's tyranny, when the government can do what the people cannot. It's time to stand, you guys. Tomorrow's going to be a good day. Most of it will be closing arguments from the rest of the defense team, and then it'll end off with 2 hours from the prosecution's closing, and then the jury will be handed the case, and for the first time in 6 weeks, they will be able to discuss the case. Pray over those jurors. I believe that their hearts have been opened. Most of them were awake all day today. There was one that fell asleep a few times, and then the guard in front of me fell asleep. And I actually leaned over and I said, hey, he's one of the U.S. Marshals. I said, hey, you need to stay awake. And he said, no, I don't. And I thought, isn't that funny? He was the one sitting next to the jury, right? Like guarding the jury. And it just reminded me of Jesus, and when he went off to pray and he comes back and his disciples have already fallen asleep. And I said, yeah, you do, because if you fall asleep, you can't be monitoring us. And he said, well, I'll know if you're doing something wrong because I'll hear you guys. And at one point, the supporters had let out a giggle, and he says, you can't laugh. You can't laugh. He woke up to tell him he can't laugh. Somebody else sneezed, and I looked over and I said, you can't sneeze. Shh, don't sneeze. It's a little bit funny. It's been a long year. We've got to have some fun with it. Go out and take your stand, guys. There'll be lots of opportunities and lots of things that you can do to stand. And I don't know what those are right now, because if I tell you, somebody else is conspiring to do something wrong. So I'm not going to lead you. Be your own leader. Study the Constitution. Learn what your rights are. Educate the police officers around you. They don't know what their rights are. And don't forget about the February case. Oh, we could have a verdict as soon as Monday, guys. Ken is gone tomorrow, so they won't let him give a verdict at the end of the day. But they said that there could be a verdict as soon as Monday, and that people needed to stay within 10 minutes, because when the jury has their verdict, everybody will be called, and we will have 10 minutes notification to get there. So we're just planning to be back there on Monday, so that we can hear that not guilty verdict, and there will be a huge celebration with a lot of really great people. And of course, Ammon and Ryan will be transferred to Nevada, and that will be sad. But they are equipped for the job that God has given them, and they're ready to stand. So stand behind them. Love you guys. Keep fighting the good fight.